Hello everyone. Welcome to Dead Time Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story. It was late October when I moved into the house on Alder Lane. The sky had taken on that bruised gray tint that lingered longer each evening, and the air carried a sharpness like the bite of rusted metal. I'd found the place online, no pictures, just a brief, oddly worded description: charming two-story house, large yard, available immediately. Long-term tenant preferred. Quiet location. I was desperate enough to call. The landlord, Mr. Carroll, met me that same afternoon. He was thin and bird-like, his eyes twitchy behind smudged glasses, and he wore a fraying sweater that smelled faintly of mold. He didn't say much during the walkthrough, just jingled the keys nervously in his hand and muttered something about the previous tenant leaving in a hurry. I probably should have asked more questions, but the rent was absurdly cheap, less than half what I'd been paying in the city, and I needed the solitude. After what happened with Claire, well, silence felt like a luxury I could finally afford. Caro had me sign the lease at the old wooden kitchen table, his pen scratching the paper like it resented every stroke. When I asked if there was anything I should know, leaks, pests, old wiring, he only glanced toward the ceiling and said, "It's an old place. It remembers things." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He didn't laugh back. As I loaded the last of my boxes into a hallway that evening, I noticed how the house seemed to settle around me, like it had been holding its breath and was finally exhaling. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet in a way that felt too deliberate, like footsteps I wasn't making. I chalked it up to my imagination and kept unpacking. That night, I slept on a mattress on the floor of the upstairs bedroom, too tired to set up the frame. The wind blew through the bare trees outside, and a branch tapped steadily on the window like it wanted in. Somewhere around 2:47 a.m., I woke up with the unsettling feeling that someone was watching me. The bedroom door had creaked open. Just a few inches. I stared at it for a long time, unmoving, breath shallow. "Probably just shifted," I whispered, trying to believe it. But I wasn't sure I had left it open. The morning light that filtered through the blinds was pale and uncertain, barely cutting through the shadows that clung to the corners of the room. I sat up, stiff from sleeping on the floor, and glanced at the door. Still ajar. Exactly as it had been when I woke in the night. I stared at it for a moment, then got up and gently pushed it shut. It clicked into place with a soft snick, solid and sure. The doorknob was old brass, worn smooth from years of use, but it held firm. The hallway beyond smelled faintly of old wood and something I couldn't quite place. Damp fabric, maybe, or earth. I dismissed it. Probably just the insulation. Old houses always had quirks. I made coffee in the ancient stovetop percolator Caro had left behind and walked the house while it brewed. The floor creaked beneath my steps in unpredictable rhythms, like it was responding, echoing me with a second, softer beat. Tap, tap. Step, creak. Too much Stephen King, I muttered to myself. Still, I paused at the base of the staircase and looked up. The hallway above was dim, the light bulb in the overhead fixture flickering like it was gasping for breath. I'd unpacked maybe 2 boxes the night before and already felt like the place was swallowing my energy. That unease, that lingering tension in the chest, I tried to reason it away as stress, exhaustion, change. After all, I'd left a whole life behind in the city. Claire's voice still rang in my ears sometimes, especially at night. "You're running," she'd said during our last conversation. "But you're not running from me. You're running from yourself." Now, I wasn't sure if it was myself I was running from, or to. I spent the afternoon in the small study downstairs, which had a broad window looking out onto the leaf-strewn yard. I set up my laptop and tried to write. I managed a sentence, maybe two, before my attention drifted again and again to the staircase. I kept hearing something. Not voices exactly, more like the faint shift of weight, with groaning, as if someone was slowly pacing the hallway above. I stood, half smiling at myself, and called out, "If there's a raccoon living in the attic, now's your chance to pay rent." Silence. Then a single, soft knock, from directly overhead. I froze, eyes locked on the ceiling. The knock didn't repeat. No scampering, no clawing. Just that one deliberate sound. Eventually I told myself it had to be the plumbing. Pipes cooling. Wood expanding. Rational explanations were still comforting. Still possible. That night, I triple-checked the bedroom door. I even wedged a chair under the knob. And still, I woke at 2:47 a.m. The door was open. And the chair was lying on its side. I didn't move for a long time. Just lay there, heartbeat fluttering like a bird trapped in my throat, staring at the open door. The hallway beyond it looked darker than it should have been. Not the natural dark of night, but something denser, like fog with weight. Like something thick weighted just beyond my line of sight. I eventually rose, my legs stiff and uncertain beneath me. I picked up the chair, hands trembling more than I wanted to admit, and jammed it back beneath the doorknob. This time, I braced the heavy box on top of it, balancing it so precisely that any shift would send it crashing to the floor. It took a long time to fall asleep again. When I did, my dreams were warped and unsteady. I was in the hallway, only it wasn't my hallway. The floor was slick, damp. I could hear breathing, rasping, deliberate. I turned toward the bedroom door, but it was gone. Only a wall stood where it should have been, stained and pulsing gently, like it was alive. I woke just after dawn, skin clammy with sweat. To my relief, the door was closed. The chair and the box were still in place. Maybe the night before had just been a dream. A hallucination. Sleep paralysis, perhaps. But even as I entertained that idea, I didn't believe it. Not really. That morning, I wandered the house with a strange purpose, examining things I hadn't paid attention to before. The light switches were old brass toggles stiff with age. The wallpaper on the staircase was faded and curling in the corners, revealing the plaster underneath. In the dining room, I found deep gouges in the hardwood floor beneath the table, long parallel lines, like something had been dragged. In the den, behind a warped bookshelf, I found something stranger. A nail had been driven into the wall at shoulder height. From it hung a small, handmade charm, twine wrapped around a bundle of sticks and feathers, bound in what looked like red thread or something thicker. It was old, dusty, almost brittle. It felt wrong in my hand. Warm, like it had just been touched. I left it where it was. Later that afternoon, I drove into town. A few groceries, a power strip, a six-pack. I told myself I needed to stock up, but truthfully, I just wanted to be around other people. To feel less isolated. To remember what normal felt like. The town was small, just a few blocks of shops and diners, most of them closed or under renovation. I stopped in at a tiny corner store where the clerk, a middle-aged woman with graying braids, rang up my items with a distracted glance. When I gave her my address to sign up for a loyalty card, she paused. "Alder Lane?" she asked, voice quiet. "Yeah. Just moved in last week." She hesitated, then leaned slightly closer over the counter. "That place sat empty a while after the last one left. Shame, really. She was nice. Quiet. What happened to her?" The clerk's eyes didn't blink. Didn't say goodbye. Just vanished. Some say she ran off. Others, she trailed off, then gave me a tight smile. Well, houses get lonely too. She didn't charge me for the coffee. The charm I'd found behind the bookshelf kept creeping back into my thoughts. That night, I couldn't help myself. I went back to the den with a flashlight and gently moved the bookshelf again, careful not to scratch the floor more than it already was. The little charm still hung there, swaying gently, though there was no draft. I stared at it for a long moment. The twine seemed newer than the feathers, fresher, like someone had retied it more recently, reinforcing something frayed or forgotten. I left it undisturbed. By the time I went to bed, a storm was starting outside. Rain lashed at the windows and the old gutters moaned under the weight of autumn's shedding leaves. The steady hiss of water was soothing, and I managed to drift off around midnight. But as if pulled from a great depth, I woke at 2:47 a.m. again. This time, the door hadn't opened. It was already open. Wider now. Almost fully. The hallway beyond glistened strangely, as if the floor had been polished or soaked. I sat up, blanket clutched to my chest, heart punching against my ribs. Nothing moved in the hall. No shapes. No shadows. Then the sound started. A soft scratching. Faint at first. Almost beneath hearing. It came from the floorboards directly beneath my bed, as though something was moving between the planks. The scratching was slow, deliberate, one claw, then another, then a pause. Then again. Scrape. Scrape. Wait. I swung my legs off the mattress and stood, listening. The moment my feet touched the floor, the scratching stopped. I stayed frozen for a full minute, then reached for the flashlight on the nightstand. Its narrow beam pierced the shadows, but revealed nothing. No movement. No gaps between the floorboards. Just old wood and stillness. I didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, I checked beneath the bed. Nothing there, of course. The scratching had sounded too close, too inside the wood. As if something wasn't under the bed, but inside the bones of the house itself. I spent most of the next day on the porch with my laptop, trying to get work done. I managed a few hundred words, but they were hollow. Uninspired. I kept glancing up at the house like it might lean forward and whisper to me. A car passed now and then, locals mostly, heads down, eyes avoiding my gaze. One woman walking her dog crossed the street before she reached my lawn, murmuring something under her breath as she went. That evening, just after sunset, I found a note slipped beneath the front door. It was written on torn notebook paper, the ink smudged. Don't sleep upstairs. She likes it when you sleep upstairs. There was no signature, and no footprints on the porch. I read the note 5 times. Then again, out loud, as if the act of speaking it would somehow make it less real. The words scraped against the silence like dry leaves against glass. She likes it when you sleep upstairs. I checked the front porch. It had rained earlier, soft, misting drizzle that left a sheen on the wooden steps. But the boards were clean, dry now. No footprints. No smudges. No indication anyone had been there. Inside, I placed the note on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it might shift if I blinked. My hand hovered above it. The writing wasn't familiar. Not Claire's. Not the landlord's. It was jagged, rushed, like someone had written it quickly, afraid of being caught. Something had changed. I didn't go upstairs that night. I made a bed on the old couch in the den, curling beneath the throw blanket, the charm behind the bookcase only a few feet away. I kept the TV on, volume low. Static from an unused channel fuzzed through the dark room, soft enough to drown out the quiet. I stared at the ceiling, watched the flickering shadows pulse across the light fixture like veins. Around 2:30 a.m., the lights dimmed. Not flickered, dimmed, slowly, steadily, until the room felt smothered in shadow. The TV screen fuzzed louder for a moment, then went dead. Silence. The floor creaked upstairs. One step. Pause. Another. I reached for the flashlight and pointed it toward the stairwell. Nothing moved, but I heard it again. Step, step, pause. Then the sound stopped. A new noise followed, a faint shuffle, like fabric sliding across wood. Then something softer. A whisper? I held my breath. WHRRK. It was the sound of the upstairs bedroom door opening. I stayed frozen for over an hour, clutching the flashlight in both hands like it was a weapon. At dawn, the light returned all at once. The TV blinked back to life with a pop of static, and a bird chirped outside like nothing had ever happened. But when I crept upstairs to check the bedroom, I found the door wide open. And something new. Sitting in the middle of the mattress was a leather-bound journal I had never seen before. Old. Worn. The leather darkened in patches as though with sweat or oil. I picked it up with trembling hands and flipped through its yellowed pages. It was filled with handwritten entries, dated, and all signed by someone named Anna. May 3rd. Something keeps opening the door at night. I think it wants me to look. May 10th. I saw her. She was at the foot of the bed, watching me. I didn't breathe. She didn't blink. May 13th. I put the charm up. I think it helped, but only when I stayed downstairs. The final entry was short. Shaky. June 4th. She's not in the hallway anymore. She's in the floor. I sat at the kitchen table, the journal open in front of me, the note beside it like a curse. The handwriting matched. Same erratic strokes. Same uneven slant, like each letter had been dragged across the page under duress. Whoever Anna was, she'd been terrified, and alone. I ran my fingers over the name she'd signed more than once. Anna. No last name. No address. Just page after page of her descent into the same shadow I now felt curling around me. The entries began normally enough, dates, weather, brief notes about the house. But by the second week, they became increasingly frantic. May 15th. She doesn't want me to leave. Every time I pack, something goes missing. Keys. Wallet. I found my phone in the fridge this morning, battery dead. I didn't put it there. May 18th. She knocked 3 times on the headboard. I thought it was the wind. Then she whispered my name. Not loud. Just enough that I heard it in my bones. May 19th. I tried to sleep downstairs. She followed me. The last pages were stained. Some ink was smudged. Water damage? Sweat? Or something else? One entry simply read. May 30th. She comes when the lights go out. When they dim, she listens. I snapped the journal shut and shoved it into a drawer. Out of sight. Out of mind. But the damage was already done. Her words had burrowed into me, nested behind my eyes. For the first time since moving in, I considered leaving. Really leaving. But when I went to grab my keys from the dish near the door, they weren't there. I checked the counter. The junk drawer. My coat pockets. My bag. Nothing. I turned the house upside down over the next 30 minutes. Cushions. Under the couch. Laundry hamper. Even the bathroom medicine cabinet. No keys. I went out to the car anyway, hoping maybe I'd left them in the ignition like an idiot. The door was locked. The windows slightly fogged from the inside, as if someone had been breathing behind the glass. My stomach turned. I walked the perimeter of the house, looking for signs, anything to make this all make sense. On the back porch, beneath the rotting wicker chair I never used, I found the key ring, half buried in dirt. Cold to the touch. I didn't remember going outside the day before. That night, I didn't bother trying to sleep upstairs. I pulled the charm off the nail behind the bookcase and set it on the floor beside the couch like a crude offering. Then I sat and read Anna's journal again. One passage stuck with me. May 27th. I found her name in the floor. scratched into the wood. A name I shouldn't have said. A name I won't write. I looked at the floor beneath me. The old hardwood glowed faintly in the lamplight. I couldn't see anything unusual, but I didn't dare look too long. The entry wouldn't let go of me. I found her name in the floor. That night, after pacing the hallway until I'd worn a path into the old rugs, I retrieved a flashlight and dropped to my knees in the den. I scanned the floor slowly, inch by inch. The wood was old, with scattered nicks and scuffs, but nothing that looked intentional. I pressed my palm flat against the boards, as if I might feel something Anna had felt. A warmth. A hum. Anything. Then I noticed the discoloration. A patch of the floor, just beneath the corner of the couch, was darker than the rest. Barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I slid the couch away and shone the flashlight down. There, etched into the wooden faint, jagged lines, was a word. I leaned closer. The letters were shaky, scratched rather than carved. Like someone had used a nail or a knife in desperation. Marrow. The name whispered across my mind as though it belonged to a memory I had no right to possess. My mouth went dry. I didn't speak it aloud. Instead, I took a picture of it with my phone and put the couch back over the name like it might muffle something. I sat back on the love seat and stared at the dark window, watching my own reflection stare back. The lights flickered, then steadied. I turned on every lamp in the house. Around 1:30 a.m., I finally dozed off, the journal clutched to my chest like a relic. And the dream came. I was in the den, but it was wrong. The wallpaper was torn, hanging in strips like peeling skin. The light bulb overhead dangled from frayed wires, swaying. In the corner, beneath the bookshelf, something crouched. I couldn't see it fully, just the shape of tangled limbs and long hair like seaweed draped across its face. It was humming. Low, rhythmic, almost childlike. Then it stopped and turned toward me. Its face was void, no features, no eyes. Just a blank canvas of mottled skin. But somehow, I felt its gaze. Deep. Searching. Say it, it whispered in a voice like drowning leaves. I couldn't speak. My jaw was locked. It crawled toward me on all fours, each movement wet and slow. Say it. I woke with a scream caught in my throat, heart battering my ribs like a caged thing. The room was quiet again. But something smelled faintly of salt water. And there, on the wall above the bookcase, written in dripping strokes like condensation. Marrow. Morning brought no comfort. The word had vanished from the wall by sunrise. No trace of moisture, no stains, nothing. But I knew what I saw. And I could still smell it, brine, mildew, something rotten just beneath the surface. I spent the morning on the porch with a mug of black coffee and the journal in my lap. The town felt distant, even with cars moving down the road. The world beyond Alder Lane might as well have been on another planet. I was stranded somewhere in between. I decided to call Caro. He picked up after the tea. I could have said everything, about the door, the scratching, the dreams, the journal. But something stopped me. Something in his voice. Like he already knew. Like he was waiting. I found a journal. From someone named Anna. A rustle of fabric. Movement on the other end. You shouldn't be going through things that aren't yours. It was left behind, I said. Hidden. She wrote about something in the house. Something that watches her. More silence. Mr. Caro? He let out a long, slow breath. She was the last tenant before you. Where did she go? She didn't say goodbye. That phrase again. The clerk at the store had said it too. I found a name scratched into the floor. I added. Marrow. Does that mean anything to you? Silence. Then the call disconnected. I stared at my phone. He hadn't hung up in anger. There had been no click. Just nothing. The call had been severed, like the line itself had gone dead. Less than an hour later, I heard a knock at the door. It was Caro. He stood there, gaunt and exhausted, his sweater hanging off him like an old skin. He looked around once before stepping inside without waiting for permission. "I shouldn't be here," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Then why are you?" He ignored me, walked straight to the den. His eyes landed on the spot beneath the couch. He didn't ask if I'd found it. He knew. "You didn't say the name out loud, did you?" I shook my head. His shoulders relaxed. Barely. He knelt and reached beneath the couch, hand brushing the floorboards. "She scratches it in every house," he whispered. "Every place she sleeps. She wants someone to say it. That's how she gets in." "Who is she?" Caro looked up at me. His eyes were bloodshot, watery. "She's older than this place. Older than all of us. They say she lived here before there was even a town. A girl who drowned in the marsh behind the hill. But she came back wrong. What does she want?" His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "She wants to be remembered." Caro sat stiffly on the love seat, his knees pressed together, hands folded like a boy in church. He wouldn't look at me, just stared at the corner where the name lay beneath the couch. "I used to think it was a story," he said. "Something my grandmother told me to keep me out of the woods. But then I bought this place." He gave a dry, humorless laugh. "I was younger. Thought I'd fix it up. Flip it. First time I walked through, I found the charm. Same one. Same spot. I didn't know what it was, so I burned it. Thought it was some weird backwoods superstition." His eyes flicked toward the bookshelf, where the charm now sat again, undisturbed. "That night, I had a dream of drowning," he continued. "But it wasn't water. It was her. Hair. Skin. Cold fingers. She climbed into my mouth. Filled me." I swallowed hard. Caro leaned forward. "The name isn't a name anymore. It's a key. The more you think it, the closer she gets. You don't have to say it. Just believe it." I shifted in place. "So what am I supposed to do?" "Leave." He stood, bones creaking like the house around us. "Take nothing with her name on it. Not the journal. Not the picture. Not the charm. Especially not the charm." "Why?" "Because it binds her here. But it also draws her to you. You carry it with you," she follows. He moved to the door. "I'm going to list the house again. Someone always comes. It's how it works." I stepped between him and the exit, anger rising through the fear. "You knew this was happening. You knew what she was. You let me walk in here blind." Caro's face twisted, not in cruelty but regret. "You were already chosen," he said. "You answered the ad." Then he left. No goodbyes. Just the soft click of the door. I stood in the hallway long after he was gone, the silence returning like a fog creeping through the windowsills. I didn't touch the journal again. That night I tried not to dream. I left every light on in the house. Turned the TV to an old comedy rerun and let it play on a loop. I even moved a second charm, the one I'd made from a string and some twigs myself, into the bedroom, just in case. But when I woke at 2:47 a.m., the lights were off. All of them. The TV was dead. The room was dark. And something was breathing beneath the floor again. Slow. Wet. Waiting. And the word I'd tried not to think about. It was repeating itself in my head like a heartbeat. Marrow. 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 I didn't move. Didn't even breathe. Just listened to the thing beneath the floorboards as it inhaled. Wet, dragging breaths like a gill-less thing trying to remember how lungs worked. It wasn't pacing anymore. It was positioned. Directly beneath me. As if it knew. The silence stretched out, taut and fragile, until I finally reached slowly, slowly, for the flashlight I kept beside the couch. The moment my fingers touched it, the breathing stopped. I clicked it on. The beam of light caught the dust swirling in the air like ash. The room appeared normal at first glance. Bookcase, table, charms still resting in the corner. But the temperature had dropped significantly. My breath fogged the air. I stood and aimed the flashlight downward. The floorboards at my feet pulsed faintly, as if something was shifting underneath them. Like skin, swelling, then relaxing. And then, I heard her voice. Not spoken. Not really. It bloomed in my ears like pressure, not sound. I remember you now. I stumbled back, flashlight skittering across the rug. The floorboards trembled once, then settled. My heart pounded in my throat. Get out of my house, I whispered, even as I knew it wasn't mine. From the hallway, a soft knock. Not the front door. Not the bedroom. The basement. I had never opened the basement. The door was narrow and warped, tucked between the kitchen and the hallway. The lock was rusted shut when I moved in. I hadn't thought to force it. I shouldn't have. But I did. I found the old key hanging from a nail in the pantry and worked it into the lock, muscles tight, breath shallow. The metal groaned like something in pain, then gave way. The door creaked open on its own. The basement stairs descended into darkness. The air that rushed out was damp and sour, like rotted wood soaked in river water. I held the flashlight up and stared into the stairwell. Every instinct screamed at me to shut the door, to run. But I stepped forward. 1 foot. Then another. The wood groaned beneath me, but I kept going. At the bottom, the flashlight flickered, and something scratched against the far wall. Slowly, like it was spelling something. I raised the beam of light, hand shaking, and saw her, for the first time, curled in the far corner of the basement like a broken puppet. Long limbs folded backward, hair matted and dripping. Her face was turned toward the wall, her spine arched at an impossible angle. Her hands, too long, too many fingers, were dragging a single word into the brick with jagged nails. Marrow. She stopped, and began to turn her head. Her neck moved in a slow, cracking spiral, vertebrae straining like piano wires, until her face was visible in the beam of my flashlight. She had no eyes. Just 2 hollow sockets, cavernous and pulsing faintly, as if something else looked out through them. Her skin was mottled, bloated in places like it had absorbed too much water. Her lips were split open from the corners, dry and peeling, yet drawn into something that looked almost like a smile. I couldn't move. She stared at me, or whatever she used to stare. My flashlight trembled in my hand, the beam shaking like a heartbeat across the bricks. Then she spoke. Her voice wasn't a voice. It echoed in the walls, in the air. A whisper that didn't pass through ears, but burrowed straight into the chest. Say it. I backed up 1 step. She didn't move, but her head tilted, just slightly. Bird-like. Curious. Say it. Say it so I can come home. My mouth opened against my will. The name perched at the edge of my tongue like a spider, twitching its legs. I bit down. Hard. Tasted copper. No. The word came out hoarse. Her smile faded. For a moment, everything was still. Then the light from the flashlight flickered and died. Darkness slammed down like a curtain. I spun and scrambled up the stairs, heart jackhammering in my chest. Each step creaked beneath me like something was pushing back, like the house didn't want to let go. I reached the top, slammed the door, and locked it. I sat against it, gasping, every light in the kitchen now flickering in rhythm with my pulse. That was the first time I felt it, that she wasn't just under the house. She was in the walls, in the floor. A part of the house now, woven into the grain of the wood, the breath of the walls. She was closer than she had ever been, and she was awake. I stumbled into the bathroom and turned the faucet on full blast. Splashed cold water on my face, hoping I could wash the memory from my eyes. When I looked up, I screamed. The mirror was fogged, but through the mist, in the center of the glass, a single word had been traced in a trembling hand. Remember. I wiped the mirror clean with a trembling hand. The word vanished beneath my fingers, leaving only condensation and my pale, distorted reflection. I didn't recognize the expression on my own face: wide eyes, gaunt cheeks, a jaw clenched too tightly to be natural. The person staring back at me looked like they hadn't slept in days. Because they hadn't. I needed help. Real help. I grabbed my phone, thumb shaking over the screen as I pulled up the browser and typed, Marrow name meaning folklore. Dozens of results popped up. Most were innocuous. Marrow, a term for sea people, sometimes benign, sometimes seductive. In Irish folklore, they were beautiful, otherworldly. But the deeper I searched, the darker it became. One obscure site, black background, red serif font, copyright from 2002, had a post title, The False Drowned. I clicked. The false drowned are spirits of those who should have died, but were held back by unnatural desire. They return wet, hollow, and empty-eyed. They do not hunger for blood. They hunger for presence. For memory. Once invited, they remain. The key is the name. Speaking it aloud grants them shape. Thinking it draws them closer. Writing it feeds them. They cannot be killed. Only denied. I closed the tab. Backed away from the table like the screen had burned me. A loud crack echoed from upstairs. Not a creak, not a groan, crack, like old wood splitting beneath sudden weight. I grabbed the flashlight again and climbed the stairs slowly, each step a scream in my bones. At the top, the air was colder than it had any right to be. The bedroom door was closed. But the sound was coming from inside. A steady scrape. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. I reached for the knob. It was ice cold. With a deep breath, I turned it and opened the door. Nothing moved. The room was empty, at least at first glance. But when I shone the light on the far wall, my stomach clenched. The plaster was scratched, gouged in the same jagged lines I'd seen before. Marrow. Again and again. Carved into the wall. The dresser. Even the ceiling above the bed. A dozen repetitions, frantic and overlapping. On the pillow was a lock of hair. Not mine. It was damp. I backed out of the room, shutting the door, bolting it from the outside with a chair and a piece of rope. Then I went downstairs and sat on the floor, the charm in my lap, the journal beside me. Anna had tried everything. And she was gone. Now it was my turn. The journal sat untouched beside me for over an hour. I stared at it like it might burst into flames if I opened it again. But eventually, I couldn't help myself. I cracked it open and flipped to the last handful of pages. Anna's final days in this house. The handwriting had grown erratic. Less structured, more frantic. June 1st. She watches from the floor now. I've stopped sleeping. If I close my eyes, she gets closer. I can feel her breath in my ear. June 2nd. Tried to leave. Car wouldn't start. Walked half a mile before I realized I was circling the block. I think the house turns when I'm not looking. June 3rd. No clocks are working. She hates time. She wants everything to be night. And then, the last full entry. June 4th. I said her name. I didn't mean to. I thought it. Whispered it, maybe. She moved into me afterward. I feel her hands in mine. My voice isn't just mine anymore. If you're reading this, don't let her trick you. Don't answer if she knocks. And whatever you do, don't go into the basement again. I let the journal fall shut. My hands were trembling again. I turned toward the basement door. Still closed. Still locked. But something pressed against it from the other side now. Not violently, not even physically. More like intention. Like someone standing too close, just waiting for the doorknob to turn. I moved away from the door and sat in the living room. Tried to breathe. Tried to think. The charm was beside me. It pulsed faintly in my palm like a heartbeat. I didn't know how it worked, but I knew now, somehow, that it mattered. It had power. Not enough to banish her, maybe, but enough to slow her. So I made more. I spent the next 2 hours tying twine and sticks and bits of rusted nails into crude, tangled shapes. I placed them on windowsills. Hung them from doorknobs. Lined the base of the basement door with 3 of them, overlapping. And for the first time in nights, I didn't wake up at 2:47 a.m. I woke up at 3:10 instead. To the sound of the hallway light bulb exploding. Glass hit the floor in a glittering whisper. Then came the knock on the bedroom door upstairs. Not frantic. Not angry. Just patient. Knock. 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 I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then came Anna's voice. Soft. Gentle. "It's okay," she said. "You can let me in now. I'm better. I'm safe." My throat tightened. Because I'd heard Anna's real voice. And this wasn't it. I didn't speak. Didn't move. Just sat beneath the staircase, flashlight off, heart pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. Upstairs, the knocking stopped. But her voice didn't. "It's lonely here." It cooed. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. I was scared too, remember? You read my words. You felt me." It wasn't Anna. It was a mimicry. A skin wrapped around something deeper, darker. Something hungry. "You made the charms," it said next, tone playful now, like a child caught sneaking cookies. "That was clever. They sting a little. But you can't hold the door forever. Not when you're so tired. Aren't you tired?" I squeezed my eyes shut. Pressed my hands over my ears. She laughed. Low. Wet. Croaking. Then silence. I opened my eyes and waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Nothing. Eventually I crept to the base of the stairs and shone the flashlight upward. The hallway bulb was shattered, jagged bits of glass glittering like teeth on the floor. But the door to the bedroom was still closed. Still blocked with the chair. I didn't trust it. I slept in the den again that night. Every lamp on. TV volume low. A ring of fresh charms placed around the couch like a ritual circle. Sleep came in shallow doses, like dipping my face into still water, then flinching back before I drowned. In one dream, I stood in a hallway of doors. Each opened into the same room, the upstairs bedroom. But with every repetition, it changed. The bed melting, the window pulsing, the ceiling folding downward like damp skin. She was there in every version. Watching. Smiling. And with each door I opened, she got closer. I woke just before she touched me. That morning I packed a bag. I'd made my decision. I needed to leave. I didn't care about the rent. About the lease. I didn't care if I left my books, my laptop, my clothes. I just needed to go. I stepped out onto the porch, keys in hand, bag over shoulder. The sky was overcast. Pale. Still. The car sat in the driveway, dusted with dry leaves. I approached, fumbled the keys into the lock, and paused. The windshield was fogged from the inside again. And on the passenger window, drawn in the condensation, a single word. Stay. I stared at the word on the window until it slowly began to fade, the way breath vanishes from glass when the air turns warm again. My hand was frozen on the key. Part of me wanted to open the door, wipe it clean, and pretend I hadn't seen it. The rest of me knew better. I yanked the door open, threw my bag into the passenger seat, and climbed in. The interior was ice cold. The air smelled faintly of brine and rot, like stagnant water left in a cellar. I shoved the key into the ignition and turned it. Nothing. Not even a click. I tried again. The dashboard lights blinked weakly, once, like a dying eye, and then went dark. I slammed my fists against the steering wheel. "No," I growled. "Not again." I popped the hood and stepped outside. The wind had picked up, pushing dead leaves into spirals across the yard. I lifted the hood and stared down at the engine like it might explain itself. The battery was gone. Not disconnected, gone. As if it had been pulled out entirely, wires trailing like veins torn from flesh. A shadow shifted in the corner of my eye. I spun. Nothing. But the front door of the house stood wide open. I hadn't left it that way. My mouth went dry. I backed toward the car and grabbed my bag, heart jackhammering against my ribs. I couldn't stay outside. Whatever was in the house wanted me to leave. But whatever was outside didn't want me to make it far. I stood on the porch, hand trembling as I pushed the door shut again. Locked it. Bolted it. And the moment it clicked into place, I heard the whisper. "Good. Now we can begin." It came from inside. Not the walls. Not the floor. Inside me. The voice didn't come from my throat. It rose behind my ears, coiling inward like steam from boiling water. Not loud. Just present. Pressing. Filling the empty spaces of my skull like a fog that could think. I stumbled backward into the kitchen, bag still over my shoulder, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted to break free. "Let me show you," she whispered. I shook my head. No. The floor creaked behind me. I spun. Nothing. But the den light was off. I hadn't turned it off. I flicked the switch. Nothing happened. The bulb overhead began to pulse faintly, like it was breathing. I stepped inside cautiously, the charm still lying on the table where I'd left it. It was twitching, ever so slightly, like it reacted to something near. Or inside. "You read her words," the voice said. "Now you can write your own." Suddenly my legs buckled. My knees hit the floor hard. Pain flared up my thighs, but I couldn't scream. My jaw locked. My eyes burned. The charm burst into flames. I fell backward, scrambling away from the table as the twine and feathers curled in on themselves, burning silently, no smoke, no sound. Just fire consuming pee. I tried to resist, but they curled around the pen like they belonged to it. My body was no longer fully my own. I knelt there, rigid, and watched as my hand moved across the page. I remember her. She is mine now. She will be yours next. I dropped the pen like it burned me. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were still. Too still. Like they were listening for the next command. I stared at the words on the page, my breath shallow and fast, like I'd just surfaced from deep water. The letters gleamed with fresh ink that hadn't come from the pen I dropped. It shimmered faintly. Iridescent. Almost alive. I backed away, rising to my feet on unsteady legs. Then I noticed my hands. The skin beneath the fingernails had darkened. Not bruised, stained. As if the ink had traveled from the pen, down through my fingers, and begun etching itself into me. I scrubbed at my hands with the hem of my shirt, but the color didn't fade. The stain wasn't on the surface. It was underneath. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. Instead, I sat in the center of the living room, surrounded by candles, each lit and flickering violently in the still air, as if responding to something I couldn't hear. I found an old bag of sea salt in the pantry, and poured it in a ring around me. It felt foolish, but it gave me something to do. She didn't speak to me again. not with words. But I felt her. She circled me, moved through the walls, slid beneath the floor. Her presence was heavy, dragging the temperature of the room lower with each hour. Then, at 3:12 a.m., I heard it. From upstairs. The sound of my own voice. Crying. Soft. Muffled. Like I was locked in a closet. "Please," it whispered. "Please, I didn't mean to. I want to come out now." I clutched the charmless twine in my lap and shook my head violently. "No. You're not me," the voice hiccuped. Sputtered. Then changed. Deeper. Hollow. "You were." A crash upstairs. Wood splitting. A door slamming against the wall. Then something heavy dragged across the floor. I grabbed the penknife I kept in my back pocket and moved toward the stairs, slow and deliberate. As I reached the top, the hallway lights blinked to life, only to reveal wet footprints leading out of the bedroom. The door was wide open. The bed had been gutted, sheets shredded, mattress torn open as if with claws. In the center, on the exposed wooden slats, was a circle drawn in thick black ink. Inside it, my name. And beneath it, carved into the wood, "One of Us." I stared at my name, etched into the ruined bed frame like a brand. The ink around it was still wet, thick, oily, and pungent, with that now familiar scent of rotted water and rust. The floor creaked behind me. I spun. The hallway was empty. But I heard it again. Not footsteps. Not whispers. Writing. Somewhere nearby, something was dragging across the surface. A steady scratch, 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 like a pen without paper, searching for flesh. I followed the sound. Down the hallway, past the guest room, to the old linen closet. The door was ajar. My stomach clenched. I stepped forward and nudged it open with my foot. Empty shelves. But something had been carved into the back wall. Hundreds of overlapping lines, names, phrases, all in different handwriting. Some desperate. Some elegant. Some angry. Some familiar. I scanned the mess, eyes flitting between markings. Then I saw it. Claire. Her name was there. Not once, but 3 times, scratched over itself, each attempt more frantic than the last. My blood ran cold. I hadn't thought of her in days. But now I saw her face clearly, her anger when I left, her confusion, her fear. I hadn't answered her final message. She'd said, "You don't know what's happening to you." Had she been here? Had she seen this place? I stumbled backward, heart roaring in my ears. Then a voice echoed from deep within the closet, warped, feminine, broken. "Do you miss her?" I slammed the door shut and held it closed, but nothing pushed back. Just silence again. My breath came in ragged gasps. I went downstairs without looking back. Back into the living room, back to the ring of salt, the flickering candles. I sat inside it and hugged my knees to my chest. For the first time since I arrived, I began to cry. Not out of fear. Out of exhaustion. Confusion. Grief. Because I finally understood what Anna had meant. The house doesn't just haunt you. It knows you. It becomes you. And once it has a name, it never forgets. I must have dozed off inside the circle. When I opened my eyes, the candles were burned to their stubs, hissing faint trails of smoke. The room was quiet, too quiet. Not even the wind moved outside. No creaks, no shifting pipes, no electricity humming through the walls. Just silence. And a new door. Where the hallway wall should have been, beside the stairs, past the closet, there was now a door I had never seen before. Narrow, taller than the others. Painted the same pale yellow as the rest of the interior, but without any of the age. It was pristine. Untouched. As if it hadn't existed until just now. I stood slowly, brushing salt from my arms and legs. My head ached. My fingers felt stiff, as if I'd been writing all night, only I hadn't. The journal still sat on the table, closed. I stepped toward the door. My bare feet made no sound on the wood. The doorknob was old brass, but it gleamed in the light, polished and smooth. I hesitated, then reached out and touched it. Warm. Not like metal should be. The hair on my arms rose. I turned the knob. The door swung open without resistance. Beyond it, a staircase spiraling down into darkness. This wasn't the basement. The basement door was still boarded and locked behind me. No, this staircase went farther. Much farther. It sloped downward at a gentle angle, but deeper than the house's foundation could possibly allow. The walls were tight. Plaster and timber, same as the upstairs hallway, but they seemed to breathe slightly as I stepped inside. The air was wrong. Heavier. Moist. Like standing in the belly of something sleeping. I descended. 5 steps. Then 10. Then 20. And then I heard it. My voice. Crying again. Please, it whimpered, echoing through the narrow corridor. Please don't leave me here. Please, I can't remember who I am. I stopped. The voice changed. Louder. Cruel now. You never were anyone. You were always me. The door slammed shut behind me. Darkness fell, and the walls began to breathe faster. I fumbled in the dark for my phone, hands shaking. The screen flickered on, 6% battery, flashlight active. The light was weak, barely pushing back against the blackness. I turned slowly, the narrow corridor swallowing the beam. The walls around me were damp now. My fingers brushed across the plaster and came away sticky. The smell was worse down here. Brine, rot, mildew, and something chemical, like decaying plastic left in water. The staircase continued to spiral, and possibly deeper. I should have hit the house's foundation ages ago. But logic didn't matter anymore. There were rules here, but they weren't mine. I descended. Each step groaned like a throat struggling to speak. And then, I saw something ahead. The tunnel widened slightly into a low-ceilinged chamber. The walls curved inward, wet and veined like the inside of a lung. In the center was a pool of dark water. Still. Reflective. Floating in it, half submerged, was a chair. And in the chair was Anna. Or what had once been her. Her skin was stretched tight, papery, and her hair floated around her head like algae in slow current. Her face was intact but wrong, eyelids missing, jaw slightly unhinged. One of her hands was raised, fingers curled upward like a question. I stepped closer, and her head twitched toward me. Eyes gone, but she knew. I stumbled backward, flashlight beam flailing. The water rippled. Something moved beneath it. A second shape. Then a third. Hands rose from the pool, some long, some small. One looked like a child's. Another had nails filed into sharp points. And all of them reached for me. I turned and ran. Up the steps, skipping 2 at a time, lungs heaving. The tunnel twisted. Bent. I passed the same knot of mold on the wall again and again, turning corners that shouldn't have existed. The voice followed. Why are you running from yourself? The steps flattened beneath me. I was in the hallway again. Not the house's hallway. The hallway from my dreams. Endless doors, each one slightly ajar, a sliver of light leaking through. I stood shaking in the center, the air vibrating like a plucked string. Behind one door, I heard myself crying. Behind another, Claire's voice, panicked. Behind a third, silence. I reached for the handle. And the voice whispered one last thing. This house remembers. But what do you remember? I stood before the door where I heard Claire's voice. She was calling my name. Not shouting, just repeating it softly, over and over, like a chant. There was a desperation in it I hadn't heard since the day we broke apart. Please, please just talk to me. I don't know how to help you if you won't tell me what's real. My hand moved before my brain did. I gripped the brass handle. Cold. Familiar. I opened the door. Bright light blinded me at first. I raised my arm against it, blinking, stepping through. And I was in our old apartment. Before the house. Before all of this. Claire sat on the couch, hands cradling a mug of tea, her face drawn, eyes rimmed red. You're scaring me, she said quietly, looking not at me, but past me. I turned. There I was. A version of me, standing in the doorway, pale, gaunt, distant. The other me stared at her blankly, then down at a piece of paper he held in one hand. Something handwritten. Claire got up and crossed the room. You need help, she said, laying a hand on my arm. He flinched. I watched the moment play out, a ghost in my own memory. The note in his hand drifted to the floor. I moved to it. Bent. Picked it up. It was Anna's handwriting. But the date at the top was from before I ever found the house. Before I ever moved in. I felt the pressure of a breath on the back of my neck. You found her before you knew her. I turned. The hallway was back. Claire, the couch, the apartment, gone. The door slammed shut behind me. I stood there, clutching the paper, pulse racing. Something about the timeline didn't make sense. It was all wrong. Had I seen her journal before? Had I written in it? I looked down. The paper was blank now, but ink bloomed on the surface like oil rising through water. You brought her with you. The ink bled across the page in a fluid, pulsing rhythm, like it was breathing. Words formed slowly, jagged and uneven. You let her in. You opened the door long before you saw it. I staggered backward, heart pounding. No, I whispered. I didn't know. But the house knew. The paper curled in my hand, and the walls around me quivered like they were listening. I tore the note in half. The hallway didn't change. The doors remained, dozens of them, each pulsing with faint light. Some warm, like memory. Some cold, like things best left buried. I chose another at random and flung it open. Inside, a hospital room. Sterile light. The smell of antiseptic and plastic tubing. Claire again, this time sitting beside a bed. My bed. I was pale, thinner than I remembered. Eyes closed. Tubes in my arms. Monitors blinking a slow, steady rhythm. She was holding my hand. You've been gone for days, she whispered. They say you're not dreaming, but I know you are. I know you're still in there. Please come back. I turned toward the window. Outside, the world was gray and featureless. There was no parking lot. No other buildings. Just fog. Claire looked up, suddenly alert. She met my eyes, the real me. You're not supposed to be here. Her voice was different this time. Sharper. Almost angry. I backed away from the bed. The lights flickered. The walls twitched. Then Claire rose from her chair. Her face shifted. Her eyes blackened. Her mouth pulled wider than humanly possible, stretching until the corners of her lips tore open. You never left the house, she hissed. The house left you. I ran. Back through the door. The hallway closed behind me like a wound healing over. My lungs burned. My legs shook. But I kept moving. I opened another door. A forest. Night. The trees tall, leafless, dripping with condensation. A figure knelt in the clearing ahead, back turned to me, long hair wet and matted, skin pale and shining under the moonlight. Anna. Or something that wanted me to think it was. I stepped forward slowly. Her head began to turn. Her movements were slow and unnatural, as if every vertebra in her neck had to remember how to move. Her face came into view in jagged increments, one piece at a time. She smiled at me, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Do you know where you are?" she asked, voice cracked like parchment. "Do you know who you are?" I tried to speak, but the words stuck. She stood, suddenly, too quickly, and I realized her arms were too long, too fluid, bending at the elbows like willow branches. "You followed the thread," she said. "Through the wood. Through the ink. You wrote her name before you knew her." "Marrow," I whispered without meaning to. She flinched. Her jaw twitched. The air around us thickened, rippled like disturbed water. "You do remember," she whispered. And then she laughed. Not a human laugh, no breath or voice behind it. Just the dry, rasping impression of a laugh, like the sound of a fingernail dragged across fabric. I turned and ran. Branches clawed at my arms, tore at my clothes. The forest warped around me, trees bending toward me, their bark textured like skin. I reached a narrow path and followed it blindly, gasping for air until the forest was gone. I was back in the house. The hallway again. The doors were all gone now. Just walls. Endless, closed walls. Except for one. At the end of the corridor. A black door. Smooth. Shining. No handle. No frame. Just a rectangle of absolute shadow. From behind it, I heard them. All the voices. Anna. Claire. My own. Caro. Others I didn't recognize. Dozens of them, whispering, chanting, humming a melody that didn't quite resolve into music. And then, louder than all the rest. Her. "I never needed your mouth." A pause. "I needed your memory." I took one step toward the black door. And it opened on its own. The black door dissolved as I approached, the way mist recedes under light, except there was no light here. Only darkness so thick it had shape, substance. It poured outward as I stepped inside, brushing against my arms like a velvet curtain. Then the whispers stopped. Total silence. The floor beneath my feet was no longer wood. It was cold, smooth, stone, maybe, or something older. I couldn't see anything. Not even my hands in front of my face. But I could feel. Not the presence of another, but something worse. Myself. Memories, ones I hadn't called in years, rose to the surface. Not images, but sensations. The icy grip of fear the night I left Claire. The weight of guilt I refused to name. The ache of knowing something was wrong before the house, but never daring to admit it. The silence of this room reached inside me and held them up like offerings. And then came the sound of dripping water. One drop. Then another. And in the distance, a dim glow. I moved toward it, step by cautious step, until I reached the edge of a circular chamber. There was no ceiling. The walls arched high into a black sky I couldn't comprehend. In the center stood a massive, standing mirror, tall and cracked, its surface rippling like liquid glass. I stepped closer, and saw myself. Not as I was now, but as I had been weeks ago. Healthier. Clear-eyed. Standing outside the house for the first time, bag in hand, keys jangling. Full of purpose. Behind me in the reflection stood her. Marrow. She wore my skin like a shawl. Her head rested on my shoulder, her eyes, not hollow now, but full of stars, staring back at me with love. Or longing. Or hunger. I touched the mirror. It rippled outward, and I was pulled in. Dragged. Sucked through. I hit the floor hard on the other side. Wooden floorboards again. Dust. Faint light. I was in the bedroom. The real one. Back in the house. Everything was quiet. But something was different. The house knew me now. And I wasn't alone. I lay still on the bedroom floor, letting the quiet unfold around me. Dust floated in the thin shaft of morning light filtering through the blinds, but it looked wrong. Heavier. Almost like ash. The room hadn't changed. But I had. I sat up slowly. My body ached, like I'd been gone longer than a night. My limbs didn't feel quite connected, my hands slightly delayed, as though reacting a fraction of a second after I commanded them. From downstairs came the sound of footsteps. Not slow. Not careful. Confident. Someone was in the house. I rose, steadying myself against the wall, and moved out into the hallway. The lights flicked on without me touching a switch. Every bulb. Every room. Warm. Welcoming. The house wanted to be seen now. I descended the stairs one at a time, pulse steady, eyes scanning for movement. And there she was, in the living room. But it wasn't her. It was me. The copy sat on the couch, flipping through Anna's journal. Legs crossed. Calm. Relaxed. When it looked up, it smiled. "You made it back," it said in my voice. Good. I didn't speak. I could barely breathe. The copy closed the journal gently and stood, mirroring my posture exactly. "I was starting to worry you wouldn't finish the descent. That you'd run. Like Claire did." I clenched my fists. "What are you?" I whispered. It tilted its head. "I'm what you left behind. I'm what you forget every time you rewrite yourself. I'm your echo." It stepped closer, and its skin rippled, like fabric stretched too tightly over bone. "No," I said. "You're her." It smiled wider, and in a voice layered with others, Anna, Claire, Caro, and dozens more, it whispered, "I'm what's left after Marrow is done." I turned and ran for the front door. It didn't stop me. It didn't need to. Because when I flung the door open, there was no town, no street, only the house. A second version of it. Stretching forever. Row after row of the same front porch, the same door, the same silent windows staring out into the fog. The world was gone. Only she remained. The fog stretched endlessly across the landscape, thick as cotton, soundless and still. And within it, copies of the house. Hundreds. Thousands. Perfect replicas of the house on Alder Lane, each with the door slightly ajar, each with windows black as blind eyes. I stepped OU. Anna only delayed her. Caro fed her. "You!" The echo's smile faltered. "You wrote her." I stepped off the porch. The fog thickened instantly. It coiled around my ankles. The moment I touched the ground, the earth felt wrong, springy, as if I were walking on damp fabric instead of soil. I looked back. The porch I'd stepped from was gone. The house gone. Replaced by another. And another. Each door slightly wider. Each window darker. They were all waiting. My breath came faster. Panic clawed at my throat. I ran. Past house after house, door after door. They blurred at the edges, bending subtly, just out of truth. Some were melting. Others watched. I saw curtains twitch. Eyes blink. Smiles press against the glass like steam. She was in all of them. And I had nowhere to go. Eventually I stopped. Fell to my knees. And in front of me was a house that wasn't quite the same. The door was closed. The windows weren't black. They glowed faintly blue, as though something inside still remembered light. Above the door, a single word etched in faded, flickering gold. Remember. I stood before the glowing windowed house, heart pounding, lungs aching from the cold fog I dragged through my throat. This one was different. Still wrong, but less so. Like a house that had resisted becoming like the others. The paint was chipped. The porch sagged. But the gold etching above the door, remember, was the only thing in this endless row that felt human. I stepped forward and touched the doorknob. Warm. Not like the others. The door opened with a groan. Inside, silence. But not empty silence. A child's laughter, distant and fractured, danced in the walls like static. The living room held no furniture, just a single wooden chair in the center of the floor. On it sat a woman, older than Anna, weathered, hair streaked gray, bound tight behind her head. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. She didn't move as I entered, only looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "You're late," she said. I hesitated at the threshold. "Do I know you?" She smiled faintly. "Not yet. But you will. Everyone who gets close enough learns my name eventually." I stepped inside. "You're her." She tilted her head. "Part of her. The part that broke off. That wanted to forget. I built this place, out here in the fog, so I could die in peace. Why haven't you?" "Because you remember me." The room dimmed, flickering like candlelight snuffed by breath. "She feeds on memory," the woman said. "She needs you to carry her from house to house, from name to name. You think this started here?" I said nothing. She nodded, satisfied. "She was inside you before you stepped foot on Alder Lane. The moment you read the name, she began writing herself into you. In the cracks. In the guilt." I looked down at my hands. The stains were deeper now. Not ink. Veins. Threaded black. "She's almost finished," the woman whispered. "But there's one place she hasn't reached yet. The one place she can't." I met her eyes. "Where?" The woman lifted one shaking hand and pressed it to my chest. "Here." And suddenly, the walls groaned. The windows shattered inward. And something began knocking at the door. The knocking was slow, measured, like someone tapping their way back into a home they'd once claimed, one they'd been invited into before. The woman's hand stayed pressed against my chest. Her palm was cold, but I felt warmth beneath it, something fighting, flickering faintly like a candle buried under years of dust. "Don't let her in," she said softly. I turned toward the door. The frame had begun to bend, the wood groaning like it wanted to scream. The knock came again. Knock. A pause. Knock, knock. Then silence. She was following the rhythm of a heartbeat now. The woman gripped my wrist. "She'll offer you comfort next. Faces. Words. People you love. Regret is her favorite key." The door handle began to turn. But the woman didn't move. "She can't take what you seal away," she said. "Not if you do it willingly." The door flew open. But it didn't slam or burst, it simply opened. And Claire stood there. No blood. No rot. Just Claire, in jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back, eyes full of tears. "I miss you," she said. My lungs ached. My throat clenched. I never wanted to leave. She continued, stepping forward. "We could still fix it. You just have to come with me. Just step outside. This house, it isn't real. None of this is." I almost moved. Almost reached for her hand. But then I saw her eyes. The black behind the blue. The endless tide. And behind her shoulder, barely visible in the fog, Merrill watched with a smile that was too still. The woman in the chair spoke again, firm now. "Say it." I turned back to her. "Say what?" "The word that seals memory. The word that ends it." She handed me something. A nail. Old. Iron. Cold as ice. "Speak it. Drive it down." I looked at the chair. Its wooden frame now pulsed like a living thing, groaning as the wind rose. The windows bent inward. "Claire, not Claire," screamed behind me. "Don't you remember me?" I did. And that was the problem. So I took the nail and whispered a word I didn't know I knew. It tasted like salt and iron. I drove the nail into the center of the floor. and the house shook. As the nail pierced the wood, the house let out a sound I can only describe as grief. It wasn't a shriek or a roar, but a deep, inward moan, like the air itself was folding in on sorrow too vast to be spoken. The floor beneath me split, not broken in pieces, but peeled, like skin from a wound. Black light surged up through the gap, pouring across the room and swallowing everything it touched. The version of Claire, her skin beginning to run like wax, stepped back toward the doorway, screaming now in voices that weren't hers. "You remembered wrong." She reached for me, fingers twisting, arms elongating unnaturally. But the woman in the chair raised her hand. "Enough," she said, and the false Claire ignited. Not in flame, but in memory. Faces spun to her, mine, Anna's, dozens of others. She wore them like masks, changing faster than I could track, each one calling my name in a different tone. Then she dissolved into smoke. Gone. The door slammed shut. The house groaned again, deeper now, like it had taken a breath it had been holding for years. I dropped to my knees. The woman stood, her movements slow but sure. "She's not dead," I whispered. "I didn't kill her." "No," she said. "But you named her. You gave the memory shape. Now it can be buried." She reached into the shadows where the mirror should have been, pulled something out. It was the journal. But this time, the cover was blank. No title. No name. Just a dark, smooth surface. She placed it in my hands. "You'll carry the last of her now," she said. "Not her hunger. Her history. This is what you earned. This is the price." I stared down at it. It was heavy. Alive. I felt the stories within it shift, settle, breathe. What happens if I open it? She met my eyes. Then she starts again. I clutched it to my chest. Outside the window, the fog began to lift. A sky emerged above the house, real, pale blue, scattered with morning clouds. The woman returned to her chair. "Go," she said. "Don't come back." I opened the door and stepped into the world again. The fog broke around me like silk tearing in slow motion. Where there had once been endless porches, there was now grass, real grass, shimmering in early sunlight, wet with dew. Birds chirped faintly in the distance. The sky was clear. I stood barefoot in a field that looked nothing like Alder Lane. Behind me, the house was gone. No porch. No door. No trace. Just the journal in my arms, warm against my chest like a pulse. I turned in a slow circle. There were trees at the edge of the field, but they didn't bend like watchers anymore. No rippling bark. No twitching shadows. I was out. I walked. I don't remember how long. Time returned gradually. First the sunlight warming my shoulders, then as wind, then the smell of pine and dirt. By the time I reached the road, the sun was past its peak. A car passed. Slowed. The driver leaned out, a woman in her 50s, concern wrinkling her forehead. "You all right?" she asked. "You lost?" I opened my mouth and almost said, "the house," but I stopped myself. Instead, I nodded. "Yeah. Just walked too far." She offered me a ride. I accepted. I didn't mention the journal in my lap. At a diner miles down the road, I bought coffee and borrowed a phone. My own had gone dark in the house and hadn't come back. I called Claire. She didn't answer. But her voicemail was still hers. Her voice was still hers. I hung up and sat at the booth for a long time. Later that evening, in a cheap motel, I sat on the edge of the bed with the journal in my lap, unopened. It vibrated faintly against my skin. Not with danger, but presence. The final words of the woman echoed in my head. "You'll carry the last of her now. Not her hunger, her history." I considered burning it. Throwing it in the motel tub, soaking it, torching it, watching the stories curl into ash. But I didn't. Because I knew, deep down, that the house had let me go not because I escaped, but because it was done with me. For now. I slept without dreams that night. But just before morning, I woke to find the journal open on the pillow beside me. One line written in ink I hadn't touched. You are her next address. The motel room was unchanged. The hum of the mini fridge. The stale scent of chlorine and linen spray. A flickering bathroom light. But the journal lay beside me like it had always been there, open to a page I never turned. The ink was still wet. I stared at those 6 words. You are her next address. It didn't feel like a threat. Not exactly. More like a statement of fact. I closed the journal carefully, feeling its weight settle in my hands. I didn't hear whispers this time. No shadows shifted. But I felt a presence, subtle, coiled, patient. She was quiet now. But she remembered me. I checked out of the motel just after dawn and boarded a bus west. I didn't have a destination. I just needed distance, miles of it, days of it. Anything to convince myself I was still free. The other passengers avoided my gaze. I kept the journal in my backpack, tucked between worn clothes and a cracked laptop I hadn't opened in weeks. It pulsed faintly. Not physically, but in thought. I could feel it, always there, like an unsent message. That night, I found a boarding house in a small town off the highway. A single room. Thin walls. A landlady with watery eyes who barely looked up when I paid in cash. I unpacked nothing. I laid on the bed, staring at the ceiling. And I listened. No creaks. No whispers. Just silence. It was almost worse. Because I knew she didn't need to haunt the floorboards anymore. She was closer now. Not in the walls. Not beneath the bed. Not even in the journal. In me. And though I'd escaped her house, I wasn't sure I'd escaped her story. 3 nights passed in the boarding house. I didn't open the journal. I didn't write. I didn't speak to anyone but the landlady, who only ever responded with nods or keys. She reminded me of something from the fog, quiet, with the sort of presence that didn't leave footprints. On the 4th night, I woke up at 2:47 a.m. Old instinct. I held my breath and waited. No knocks. No voices. Only the creak of a truck downshifting outside, the brush of wind through the cracked window. I let out a shaky laugh. Maybe she was done. I sat at the desk with a mug of instant coffee and stared at the journal where it rested in my backpack. For the first time, it didn't hum. It didn't seem to breathe. But I opened it anyway. I had to know. The last page I'd seen, "You are her next address," was gone. In its place was something stranger. A list. Columns of names, handwritten in different inks, styles, languages. Dates beside each one. Some crossed out. Some still underlined. At the very bottom was my name. And beneath it, one line in neat cursive. Temporary host. Observed. Memory strong. No date. I flipped to the next page. Blank. Then another. Still blank. I turned until I reached the center of the journal, where a folded sheet of paper had been inserted carefully, like a pressed flower. I opened it with trembling fingers. A house sketch. One I didn't recognize. Not Alder Lane, but familiar in structure. 2 stories, sloped roof, wraparound porch. An address beneath it. A real one. Somewhere north. Several states away. Next to the address, a single word in bold ink. Vacant. I closed the journal. And knew what it meant. The house didn't just choose us. It moved through us. And now it was waiting. I stared at the sketch for a long time. It was too detailed to be symbolic. The window panes, the warped steps, The crooked tree just outside the property line, it all felt real. Someone had seen this house, or drawn it from memory. The address was in Oregon. I hadn't been that far west in years. Had no reason to go. No people there. But the more I stared at it, the more it began to pull at me. Not like compulsion, not like mind control. More like gravity. The kind that draws water to a drain. That night, I dreamed of her again. But not as a monster. She stood at a window in the sketched house, staring out at a quiet street. Her hair hung limp, soaked. Her hands were pressed to the glass, leaving streaks of something darker than water. When she turned, her eyes were black. But her voice was mine. "Someone has to hold the story," she whispered. "You remember best." I woke gasping, the taste of salt in my mouth. The journal was open again. Same page. Same house. But now, beneath the word vacant, a new word had appeared. Incoming. I packed my bag. I didn't tell the landlady. I just left the key on the counter and walked to the bus station. I didn't stop for coffee. Didn't speak. Every reflection I passed, shop windows, car mirrors, showed my face with a slight delay. Like it was thinking about becoming someone else. 2 days later, I arrived in a small Oregon town I'd never heard of. Cold. Damp. Overcast. The house was exactly where the journal said it would be. Same tree. Same warped step. Only this time, there was a sign in the front yard. A wooden one. Freshly painted. For rent. And beneath it, in tiny letters, available immediately. Long-term tenant preferred. Quiet location. The sign shouldn't have been there. Not because it was odd for a house to be rented, but because it was identical to the one from Alder Lane. Same wood grain. Same typeface. Same strange phrasing that had lured me in the first time. I walked up the path slowly. The lawn was too green. Too flat. The kind of perfect that happens when something else is tending it. The porch groaned under my weight, but not from rot. From memory. I felt the same vibration in the boards as I had the first time. Like something beneath recognized the shape of me. The door was unlocked. I turned the knob and pushed it open. Same layout. Same faint scent of damp wood. The wallpaper was a slightly different pattern, but the bones of the place were the same. Living room to the left. Kitchen to the right. Staircase ahead. And at the top, a hallway too dark for the sunlight to reach. I didn't step inside. I stood in the doorway and pulled the journal from my bag. It was already open. The page had changed again. Return confirmed. Below it, a second note. New chapters pending. I wanted to run. I wanted to burn the journal and leave the town and scrub this address from my mind. But I stepped inside. 1 foot. Then another. Because some part of me already knew. I had been here before. Maybe not this house, not this location. But this pattern. And I'd return not because I was drawn, but because I had a job to finish. The air grew colder. The lights dimmed. And from the far end of the hallway, I heard the faint creak of a door opening. The door at the end of the hallway stood half open. It hadn't been there when I looked from the front entrance. But now it yawned wide, tall, crooked, a little too narrow, like it had been shaped around someone specific. Me. I passed the stairwell. The wood groaned underfoot, not in protest, but recognition. It didn't creak when I stepped, it sighed. Inside the room, there was no window. Just 4 walls. A bed. And a writing desk. The journal in my hand grew warm. I stepped across the threshold and stood there for a long time. I expected cold. Silence. That particular pressure that always came with her. But there was nothing. Just stillness. I placed the journal on the desk. Its cover opened without my touch. pages flipping in a breeze that didn't move the curtains. The ink inside was already forming. Not names this time. Not stories. Instructions. Sit. I did. Write what you remember. I reached for the pen beside the journal, hand trembling. And I did. I wrote it all. The house on Alder Lane. Anna. Caro. Claire. The journal. The charm. The crawl through memory and fog. I wrote until my hand cramped, until my knuckles ached, until I felt something in the floorboards below begin to settle, like a hunger being fed. When I finally stopped, hours had passed. The sun had vanished. The room glowed faintly from a single lamp in the corner, its light flickering with each beat of my heart. On the last page, one more line had appeared. Another chapter complete. Another door opened. And beneath it, "They will find this one next." I rose from the desk. The journal closed. I left it there, because that's what I was now. Not a tenant. Not a survivor. A witness. And someone would come. They always do. I moved through the house with a strange calm, like walking in a dream I'd already had. Each room I entered felt familiar, not from memory, but from having written it. The living room had no furniture, but there was an outline in the dust where a couch would sit. The fireplace was cold, the hearth cracked in the center like a split tooth. I touched it. My fingers came away black with ash. But the ash didn't smell like fire. It smelled like paper. I opened the front door. The porch greeted me with stillness. The town beyond was real. I could see movement down the block. A couple walking a dog. A child riding a scooter. Life continued just outside the fence. They didn't know what this house was. They never did. From behind me, the journal let out a low thump. A sound like a single heartbeat. I turned. It had reopened itself. On a fresh page. Empty lines waited. But in the margins scrib. Someone with just enough pain in their past, and just enough hope for a fresh start. They'd see the sign. And they'd stop. Just like I did. It started as dusk settled on the second day. I was in the upstairs room, the one with no window, writing. Not for the journal, not anymore. Just scribbling into blank notebooks I'd found in the hallway closet. My handwriting had changed. It looped and bent like Anna's now. Like hers. And I didn't mind. The light dimmed on its own. The bulb above me never went out. Just softened. Like the house was drawing a breath it would hold until someone opened the door. Then I heard it. Gravel under tires. I froze, pen hovering. Footsteps on the walk. The creak of the porch. I stood and moved to the hallway, keeping to the shadows, peering down the staircase just enough to see the front door swing fully open, not slammed, not forced. Welcoming. A man stood there. Late 20s. Backpack. Faded jeans. A paper in his hand. I could just make out the text from my place above. Rental inquiry. Alder Lane Properties. His voice called out softly. "Hello? Anyone here?" He stepped inside. 1 foot. Then another. I felt the house respond. The air thickened, not with menace, not yet, but with anticipation. A low sigh traveled up the walls, down the floorboards, through the bones of the house like blood returning to a sleeping limb. I stepped back into the shadows and watched. The man wandered the first floor slowly. Paused at the fireplace. Ran a hand along the mantel. He seemed calm. Curious. A little tired. Exactly as I'd been. He found the journal. Of course he did. It rested on the writing desk, closed, quiet, looking like nothing more than a forgotten book. He opened it with the easy casualness of someone inviting a story in. The page he landed on was blank. And then the words appeared. I couldn't see them from here. But I knew what they said. You are not the first. He read the page slowly, lips moving but making no sound. The house watched him. The air in the hallway thickened, and every floorboard under his feet gave the faintest tremor, like breathing, like the house was tasting him through each step. He moved to the kitchen, paused at the back door. Then, just as I had, he turned toward the basement. He didn't know what waited below. Not yet. But the house was remembering me through him, guiding him down the same path. A path worn smooth through repetition. I leaned over the railing, silent, unseen. Part of me wanted to shout, to warn him. But I didn't. Because I remembered Carol. Because I remembered Anna. Because I remembered me. And because some part of me now understood. This was what the house did. It didn't kill you. It didn't need to. It simply showed you yourself until you couldn't turn away. I went back to the room. The one with no window. I sat at the desk. The notebook was open again. Fresh page. The top line had already written itself. New voice. New bones. Same walls. The rest of the page waited, hungry. Below, faint as breath, I wrote. He is kind. He is tired. He will remember. I felt the house settle around the sentence like a cat curling on a lap. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. But there was no storm. That was just her stirring. Because now, the story was beginning again. And I was no longer the main character. I was the scribe. And scribes never leave. It's strange how quickly silence becomes a voice. The creak of the boards above him as he explores. The whisper of wind under the front door. The hum of the refrigerator that shouldn't work anymore. Every sound became punctuation in the story I was writing. I could feel him downstairs, flipping through the journal. I didn't need to look anymore. I knew what page he'd be on. The first door creaked open. The floor whispered his name. The story began beneath his skin. I had written those lines. And the house followed them. He moved as I wrote. He paused when I paused. He was sinking now, his thoughts latching onto the rhythm of the story. His heartbeat adjusting to its meter. His breath slowing to match the house's pulse. It was always like this, I realized. Anna probably sat where I now sat. Writing in her lap, listening, watching, until she broke. Until she was remembered too well. Carol resisted. Refused the pen. So the house made him a caretaker. A memory keeper. Someone to whisper warnings but never act. We all find our role. The journal trembled slightly. I placed my hand over it, fingers splayed like a mother calming a fevered child. It's okay, I said aloud, for myself, for her, for him. Then I felt the shift. Not just in the house. In me. I stood. The walls breathed with me now. My footsteps made no sound. I descended the stairs and passed the new tenant. He didn't even see me. His back was to me, standing in the entryway, reading the journal. Mouth open. Eyes wide. One hand raised like he was going to reach for something, but never quite moving. I stepped behind him and whispered gently. Don't worry. He didn't flinch. Didn't turn. He didn't hear it in his ears. Only in his story. He stayed in the entryway for a long time. Hours, maybe. The house doesn't care about clocks. When he finally moved, it wasn't to leave. He turned left, into the den. The same place where I first found the charm. The same place where the floor once pulsed with something sleeping beneath it. He didn't see me watching from the shadows. Didn't feel me. Not yet. He sat on the floor and opened the journal again. The pages turned on their own. He smiled faintly, though I knew he didn't understand why. Memory likes to be shared. The journal had written that in the margins. I had copied it 100 times by now, on the walls, in the crawlspace, on slips of paper I tucked into the wallpaper seams. He was humming now, A tune I didn't recognize, but she did. I felt her stir. In the walls. In the seams of the house. She moved gently now, no longer rushing forward like hunger, but drifting, waiting. This wasn't a hunt. It was a handshake. The story wasn't being forced onto him. It was being offered. And he was accepting. Upstairs, in the windowless room, a chair appeared beside the desk. One carved from the same wood as the floorboards. The ink I'd left behind there shimmered, rewriting itself, curling into the shape of his name. Not fully formed. Not yet. But close. I returned to the room. Sat in my chair. Beneath the desk was the old charm, frayed now, brittle. I picked it up and ran it through my fingers. It was never meant to save us. Just to slow her. It had done its job. The house didn't fight anymore. Because it didn't need to. It had me. And soon, it would have him. Another voice. Another witness. Another chapter. Another address. He began writing on the third day. I didn't tell him to. No one did. He just picked up the pen. At first, he copied lines from the journal. The ones that spoke loudest. The ones that echoed. She listens best when you forget your name. The door opens for the ones who bleed ink. Then he began adding his own. Short phrases. Vague. Dreamlike. But they were true. I knew they were true because the house responded. The walls grew warmer when he wrote. The stairs stopped groaning when he moved. On the fourth day, he stopped trying to leave. The rental agreement on the fridge remained unsigned. The phone rang once, a number I didn't recognize, but he didn't answer. He stayed in the house. Because the house was ready. On the fifth night, I left my chair for good. I moved to the attic. Not because I was hiding. Because I was shedding. Pieces of myself stayed behind with every floorboard I touched. I could feel my hands changing. Not in shape. In memory. They no longer ached when I wrote. They didn't cramp. The calluses were gone. They were the hands of someone who had always belonged to this story. Someone who had never been outside the house. I watched him through the slats in the attic floor. Watched as he copied my name without realizing it. Not my real name. The name the house gave me. Scribe. He was close now. I could feel her around him, brushing his thoughts, curling in his spine. He was still afraid. But fear in this place isn't a flaw. It's an inkwell. The more you feel, the more you feed. And the house was almost ready to begin again. There was no sound when the house chose him. No flash of light. No sudden scream. Just quiet, dense and perfect. He had fallen asleep in the den, one hand still curled around the pen, the other resting atop the open journal. His breath was steady, shallow. His face peaceful. He was dreaming. But not alone. She was inside the dream now. Not as a shadow, not as a threat, but as a guide. She never needed to chase him. Only to be remembered. He was giving her that willingly now. He was becoming useful. I descended from the attic without sound. The stairs did not creak. The house allowed me. The den lights were dimmed, flickering slowly in rhythm with his breath. I watched him for a moment, standing just outside the circle of light. He was murmuring something. A prayer? No. A sentence. Again and again. I see her in the walls. I see her in the walls. His fingers moved across the page without command. The words forming were not his, but they didn't resist him either. They poured through him like water through broken stone. I see her in the walls. I stepped forward, bent down, and placed my hand over his. The pen stopped. He opened his eyes. He didn't scream. He didn't flinch. He only looked at me, recognition dawning like memory returning from a deep, cold lake. You're the one from the journal, he whispered. No, I said gently. "I'm the page before yours." We sat together for a long time. No one spoke. There was no need, because we both heard her now. In the bones of the house. In the marrow of the words. The silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. The silence stretched for hours. Not oppressive, patient. He wrote without prompting now. Pages filled in steady, fluid strokes. The ink no longer smudged or bled. It obeyed him. I watched. From the hallway. From the corner. From the ceiling where the beams whispered to me in wood-grained syllables. He would be ready soon. But before he could take my place, the house had one more test for him. It came on the 7th night. I heard the wall breathe. Yes, breathe. In the hallway just outside the windowless room. The plaster bulged inward like a lung pressing forward. I reached toward it with reverence, not fear. The wallpaper split with a quiet tear, and from the crack, a hand emerged. Not rotted. Not monstrous. Human. Small. Feminine. Familiar. Anna's hand. Still reaching. Still stuck. I backed away. Let him find it. He came moments later, drawn by instinct. I watched from the stairwell as he approached the wall. His fingers trembled as he reached out and took hers. And the wall shuddered. It inhaled. And her voice poured out. Soft. Frantic. Beautiful. "I wasn't finished," she said. "I didn't get to finish." He leaned in close. "Finish what?" "My page," she whispered. "My page was stolen. You have to give it back." His hands tightened on hers. And I saw the moment it happened. His name began to fade from the margins of the journal upstairs. Mine returned in its place. Firmer. Clearer. Because he wasn't ready. Not yet. And the house always knew. Her voice haunted the hallway long after the wall closed. "I didn't get to finish." It echoed, not in air, but in thought, like a line from a song you didn't remember learning. I stood in the shadows, feeling the house settle again. It wasn't angry. It never was. It only adjusted. She was part of it now. But she wasn't supposed to speak. He had touched something sacred. Broken a seam that was meant to stay sealed. I found him in the writing room again. He sat at the desk, knuckles white, journal clutched to his chest like a shield. The lamp flickered erratically. The room smelled like dust and old pages. "She's in the wall," he whispered without looking up. "I know," I said. "But she's not yours." She asked for her page. She asked for an ending? And that's not the same. He finally looked at me. His eyes had dark circles now. Blood vessels traced the whites and spidery lines. He was thinning, drained by memory, by connection, by proximity. "She said she wasn't finished," he said. "No one ever is," I replied. He dropped the journal on the desk. It flopped open. The pages were full. Not just his writing, not just mine, hers now too. 3 voices layered over one another, tangling like roots. Anna. Him. Me. The ink bled together at the seams. The journal had started to hum. Not with a sound. With a pulse. Alive. He stood suddenly, breath shaking. "She's not sleeping anymore." "No," I said. "She's reading." He turned to me, the panic blooming now. "What happens when she finishes?" I smiled. Because that was the one question none of us could answer. Because no one had ever lived long enough to know. He didn't sleep again after that night. He paced the floors, reread old entries, whispered names he shouldn't have known. The house watched in quiet approval. Every room held him tighter. And the journal? It began turning its own pages. At first just once or twice, an idle twitch of the paper like breath. Then faster. Hours passed. Then minutes. Then seconds. page after page filled with writing that neither of us had made. Names, addresses, dates, entire paragraphs. Childhood memories I hadn't recalled in decades. Private confessions I'd never voiced aloud. It remembered everything. Because she remembered everything. He screamed the next morning when the front door vanished. I didn't bother to go down. He banged on the walls, shouted at the floorboards, tore open the kitchen cabinets and pulled drawers from the desk. But the journal never moved. It stayed on the table, humming gently, growing heavier by the hour. Like it was pulling the world into itself, making us the fiction. He turned on me eventually. "You knew," he spat. "You knew I wasn't supposed to help her." I said nothing. "You left the door open," he shouted. "You let me in." I nodded. "Of course. I needed someone to turn the page." He lunged at the journal, but it sealed itself shut. Wouldn't open for him. The lights flickered. The floor split beneath the fireplace, wide and deep and endless. A voice rose from the dark. Not a scream. A laugh. Warm. Gentle. Mocking. She liked this story. She liked him. But he had reached his end. And the page he wanted? The one Anna begged for? It was already written. Just not his. He ran. But there was nowhere left to run to. The house had shrunk. Not physically, but spiritually. The rooms no longer led where they once did. The kitchen became the basement. The stairwell looped into the attic. Doors opened into other versions of themselves, some wallpapered in his own handwriting, others blank as a first breath. The journal remained on the desk, unmoving, sealed. He tried to burn it. He found the fireplace, stuffed the book inside, and struck a match. The flame caught and died. The smoke curled backward, crawling up his fingers, into his mouth, filling his eyes with stories. He collapsed, choking on himself. On us. I stood above him, watching. Not out of cruelty, but out of ritual. I had once tried to leave too. Once tried to end it. But the house does not kill out of malice. It invites until you become part of the walls. He woke hours later, changed. Sweating. Pale. Eyes blackened with sleeplessness. But calm. He no longer screamed. He sat beside the journal and placed his hand gently over its cover. It opened for him, slowly. Pages rustled. The pen lifted from the table and placed itself in his grasp. And he wrote. I am not the first. His voice joined mine. Our styles intertwined. Ink met ink. And the journal pulsed with something close to satisfaction. The walls exhaled. The lights steadied. The house, for now, was content. And outside on the lawn, beneath the empty sky, the sign returned. Fresh paint. Same words. For rent. Weeks passed. Time does strange things in the house. The calendar on the kitchen wall peeled away one day at a time, curling like shedding skin. I no longer counted the days. There were no sunrises or sunsets, only dimming and brightening, like the house was adjusting its eyes. He stopped speaking. Not from fear. From focus. His writing changed, no longer panicked, no longer questioning. It was confident now, rhythmic. He'd begun referring to himself in the third person. The scribe moved through the hallway, cataloging the whispers. He wasn't documenting what he remembered anymore. He was documenting what she whispered. It was a perfect transition. I had once done the same. We never talk about the moment it happens. The moment you're not you anymore, not in the way you once were. You don't forget your name. You just stop needing it. He asked once, weeks ago now, what would happen if no one ever came to rent the house again. I told him the truth. She'll find a way. She always does. She sends the listing. She folds into conversations, place names, maps, dreams. One way or another, someone always finds her. That's how stories work. You don't bury them. You retell them. And one day, you forget you're telling someone else's. And believe it was always your own. It happened quietly. One morning, or what passed for morning, the door opened again. Not slammed. Not broken. Just opened. We didn't see who did it. The scribe, he who was once he, was asleep at the desk, ink smudged across his wrist, eyes twitching with dream words. I was in the hallway, folding notes into the cracks of the wall. And I felt it. Not just a breeze. A shift. A new presence. The house sighed. We both turned to the entryway at once. She stood in the doorway. Young. Late teens, maybe? Backpack. Shoes muddy from rain. A notebook clutched to her chest. She didn't speak. Didn't flinch. Just stepped inside. And the journal, our journal, fluttered open like a dog welcoming its master. The light dimmed. The wallpaper shivered. The wood beneath her shoes pulsed once. And I knew. She wasn't running from anything. She wasn't trying to start over. She'd come here on purpose. The scribe woke, his eyes finding mine. She brought her own pages, he whispered. The girl looked at us both. Dreams are drafts. She smiled, reached into her backpack, pulled out a pen. Old, gold-trimmed. The kind passed down, not bought. She began to write. Her words were strong, not fearful, not cautious. Clear. We read over her shoulder unseen, and in her lines we saw ourselves. She knew us, not by name, by pattern, by the shape of the house, the hum in the floor, the curve of the journal's spine. She'd read it before. She'd written it before. This wasn't her first visit, only her first arrival. Downstairs, the front door faded again. The porch creaked once, and the for rent sign fell into the grass and turned to ash. Because the house was no longer vacant. It was full, complete, alive. She wrote through the night. Her words didn't tremble. They carved. Each line dug into the house like nails into wood. With every sentence, the walls pulsed. The floor warmed. The attic exhaled dust. She wasn't adding to the story. She was completing it. I stood behind her in the room with no window. The scribe stood beside me. Either of us spoke. We couldn't. Not anymore. She turned the final page in the journal, one no one had ever reached. Not Caro. Not Anna. Not me. She dipped her pen in ink that shimmered like oil. Not from a bottle, but from the desk itself. The wood bleeding memory. And she wrote. The house is done watching. The light went out. Not flickered. Extinguished. Every floorboard groaned once. The walls drew a breath, and held it. Outside, the sky shifted from gray to black. Not night. Something deeper. The journal closed on its own. Locked. Not physically, but permanently. She stood. Looked at me. Then at the scribe. I'm not staying, she said. We didn't argue. She walked down the stairs, opened the door. And it let her go. For the first time in the story's entire life. The house released someone. Because the story was done. Complete. No more tenants. No more pages. No more watchers. She vanished into the morning mist. And behind her, the house sighed a final time. Then stilled. The boards cooled. The walls settled. And I knew. We were no longer writers. We were words. And the house? It no longer watched. It slept.